Let me show you the difference between yellow ochre and cadmium yellow lemon. We'll be using them as the yellow color in the Zorn palette. A powerful limited palette consisting of only 4 colors: yellow and red, and black and white. This palette is very useful for painting models and realistic portraits. It helps to keep your colors balanced. And in this episode, I want to show you how we can expand this palette to make it more useful for painting landscapes also. Yellow ochre light is a natural and muted yellow. It is one of the famous earth colors that are perfect for painting portraits. It is very opaque, and because it is a natural ochre, it is a yellow with a red shade. Synthetic ochres tend to be more yellowish. Using ochre in a realistic portrait easily gives natural skin colors. When mixed with white, we get these beautiful earthly yellows. Here's a good example of the splendid and intense use of yellow ochre in a model painting by Zorn. The yellows in the skin actually look more saturated than they really are. When adding too much white to yellow ochre, we can get a bit of a chalky effect, meaning it starts to look more pale or dull. We can easily solve this by adding a more saturated and cooler pigment, like cadmium lemon yellow. When we combine them to mix our own Zorn yellow, the mixture will be more yellowish and more saturated, giving us a more modern variation of yellow ochre. The cadmium yellow lemon here is almost the opposite of ochre in the yellow spectrum. It is a cool yellow with a slight green shade. It is very saturated, dominant, and a clean color. Mixing it with titanium white gives very powerful and cool yellows. Unmuted, it is way too strong for a realistic portrait, but it opens the door to use a Zorn-like palette for painting landscapes. If we want to use it for painting portraits, we only have to mute it down by adding some black. And then we change the temperature from cool to warm by adding some red. In fact, by doing that, we can pretty much match the ochre if we want to. And a touch of white to lift the tone value. They are pretty close. But the mix with the cadmium yellow lemon will be more saturated when mixing it with white or other colors. Mixing cadmium red with yellow ochre gives beautifully strong and deep natural oranges. Since the ochre is somewhat muted, the cadmium tends to prevail the mixture. For modern portraits or landscapes, this can be very suitable. For realistic portraits, it might need to be muted down a little. The same cadmium red mixed with the lemon yellow gives very vivid and strong oranges. Can be useful for landscapes, flowers, and abstract paintings. Here the yellow prevails the mixture. And when adding enough white, we get a color that approaches a saturated version of Naples yellow. In this case, we can lift the tone value quite a lot without the color getting pale. The biggest reason though why some artists add lemon yellow to their limited palette is that it gives way more options for painting landscapes with more saturated greens. Yellow ochre light, when mixed with black, gives us pretty muddy greens that may be suitable for a muted autumn landscape, but it's fair to say that the greens we get this way will be pretty limited for landscape options, but perfect for cooler skin tones. Using a less orangey ochre will get somewhat more vivid greens, but it will never give you those deeply saturated greens. And that is where the cadmium yellow lemon shines. Mixing it with black gives us those vivid and saturated greens. Strong and clean, cool colors. It's beautiful. So, the ochre will give you the more natural colors, especially fit for portraits and models. And the cadmium yellow will expand your color spectrum and give you the more saturated colors that can be useful for landscapes. And of course, combining them will give the best of both worlds. I hope this helps. Thank you.